Two quick things to mention. One, that I couldn't fit in on the last video, just make sure you check what's inside, because once you've put the bottom on it, you'll then tend to, when you're working on the top, you'll put something inside, whether it be a square or something, spare screws when you're screwing the top on. And obviously once that's all screwed on and glued up, you can't get it until you cut the lid off. You don't really want to be tipping this thing around on a table saw with bits of metal inside it. So check what's inside it before you do it. And then the other thing is just to say, for cleaning up the edges, yes, you can get your power sander out and do clean it up however you want, but one tip would be, if you've got either a shoulder plane, or I find easier actually to use a block rebate plane, so a block plane where the blade is going completely from side to side. And I can't do this while I'm holding the camera, but literally you can hold a piece of MDF or a piece of a ply offcut up against your edge, so that you've got that 90-degree to run it up against. And then you hold this with your left hand, and then obviously push this along if you're right-handed, and then you can just clean the edge out and just minimize the risk of digging into here. But to be honest, if you do, you've got so many opportunities to sand, fill, paint. It doesn't make too much difference, but that's just a good little tip to just put that along there. You can clamp it if you really want, but actually if you just hold it and move it, you can just skim along there with a sharp blade on your plane and clean those edges up, and then come along with a sanding block, fine sanding block, give it a clean around. You want it nice and flat, so that when we cut it, and I'll go through cutting options in a minute, you don't want it sitting on the table saw where parts of the ply are sitting up in the air and you're getting different depths of cut. So you want it nice and flat, cleaned up before you go to the next step of cutting the lid off, and that's what we're going to have a look at. Okay, so we want to cut off 70mm of the initial carcass plus the 12 here, so we're going to measure 82 down. I've got a setting up block that I use for it, because I'm going to partially cut through the 18mm, so probably cut 16mm deep on the table saw, and then I'm going to finish it off with a Japanese Ryobi saw. There are lots of options, again, depending on what equipment you've got, from track saws to all different types of saws. The most basic, obviously, doing it by hand, and maybe using a Japanese saw to do it, marking it all the way around, sawing it very carefully by hand, and then marking up the two pieces with straight edges again, and then cleaning down with a plane. But most of us have got access to a table saw or a power saw of some sort. So what I'm going to do is set up the table saw. I need to first remove the crown guard, remove the riving knife, and just change the blade for a more suitable blade. And then I'm going to show you how to set the depth, and again I keep a little block for setting that. And then I'm going to do the first cut all around the box. Okay, so crown guards removed, riving knife removed. I couldn't remember, I normally am pretty good at writing notes, but the blade that was in there I didn't particularly like. This one's a thin kerf blade, and I'm pretty sure this is the one that I used last time that gave me a nice cut. We'll soon see. So one little tip, because the box is quite big and there's quite a long surface area, if you've got some wax, just clean up the bed of your saw. It will make pushing it through a little bit easier, so I'll do that in a minute. We need to set, obviously, your fence 82mm from your blade. But the other thing is, we need to decide how greedy we're going to be as far as setting the height on our blade. There's no point being extra safe and cutting this, because you're going to leave yourself a lot to hand saw, and you'll be surprised how with a couple of mil, even less sometimes, but a couple of mil, you can, the box holds together great. So, you know, I would say a couple of mil left. I'll check that in a minute and adjust it, get that set, get the fence set 82, and then I'll put the box through and cut it. Ready to start cutting now. I'll do it on time lapse so that it cuts out all the noise and just gets through it quicker. you'll see I've written top in big letters on there because to remind me, top up against the fence. I'm cutting the lid off and then I'll flip the box rather than turn it round. It doesn't really matter on what order you do them in. I tend to do an end first, then I do the 2 long sides, and then obviously because then 3 of the sides are down to just being held by a mil or so, leave myself one of the shortest ones to do when it's least stable, but it'll be fine. And I might just check the depth of cut with a vernier after I've done the first cut. I've just stopped having done 2 cuts because it's just a good opportunity to show you on the normal video. The extraction is just winding down. So I've done the 2 cuts, nice and clean. And then if I go around here, you get an idea on the end how much is left. So, you know, it's about 1.5 mil. So now I can finish off the last 2 sides and then do the hand cutting. Well, that cut nicely. I think there was one little jink as I was coming out of one end, but by the time we clean it up, you won't see it. It's a nice clean kerf line that goes down, probably all bar about 2 mil. So now it's hand cutting it. So again, you can cut these many different ways, whatever you find. I'm not saying my way is the way, it's the way I found that's useful. So if I use the cross-cutting teeth, the finer teeth on a Ryoba, and yes, you would normally grip these at this end, but I find I want to have control and put my left hand along the side of the blade. In fact, if I put the camera on there, I sort of want to be able to steady the side of the blade so that I don't catch either of these 2 edges. I get the best cut. And of course, you start off at a corner, work your way along. If you've done 2 or 3 sides and it starts to get a bit unstable, then you can just pop a clamp across here and turn it over. I've got it on 2 sawhorses again, and I use a yoga mat just for grip. Stop scratching things up as well. And the other advantage of using the Japanese saw, obviously it hasn't got a back on it, but because Japanese saws cut on the pull, that means there's no back on it, and also we're pulling it straight, and we can't get in here with a back saw. The other thing is, I want to see what's going. I don't want to start breaking timber off on the inside. So if I was pushing and it's breaking off in the inside, I can't see. Actually, I'm pulling against the surface on the inside, and I've already cut on the outside and I can see it. So it gives you the cleaner finishing cut, but you'll find what works for you. That thin curved saw blade just cut really nicely. So I'm going to set up now. Well, I might have a cup of coffee first, and then I'm going to start hand cutting this through. Piece of timber in there about the thickness of the kerf just to keep it apart the same amount. Pop the clamps on it, and now I'll turn it over. Now cut. The edges will be a little bit rough, maybe on the inside. I'll just want a bit of a clean up. Right, let's put the camera onto there. So we've got the makings of a... So the lid's already nearly cleaned up, took me a few minutes. A little bit of a loose delaminating ply in the corners. I've popped a bit of glue down there, and I'll just clean up that corner after that's set. And other than that, I'm just going to whip round with a fine sanding block and just knock the sharp edges off so nothing chips or breaks off very easily. and then I'll do the same clean up on there, and then that's ready for the hinges. Sign off then. So edges are cleaned up. Yes, I'll do more sanding when I've done all the plugging and cutting and ready for painting, but for fitting and doing hinges, everything's cleaned up. And you can see how forgiving it is, because you're not even going to see this joint line, because you're going to fit the dust seal, which is going to overhang that part anyway. So even if there was any little chips there, you'd be okay. So that's going to fit on there. And now I've got the table all set up for hinges and casters. So we've got to cut the piano hinge to length and then get the hinges fitted. But that's definitely for part 6. So thanks for watching. If there's any questions about tools, anything to do with the construction, one thing that I have noticed, I've been saying the height of everything is 460. It is of the sort of the sides and the front when you cut them, but actually by the time you've put the thickness of the top and the bottom on, you're adding on another 24, so it's 484. But it depends how thick of ply you put on the top and the bottom. But yeah, so I'll have a clear up now, and I'll see you in part 6. Thanks for watching.